Decrypting incoming transmission. Codename Scorpio. The smuggler's new engine. Kane knew the deal was wrong. The engine cost more than the ship. No one sells a black market engine this powerful for 40,000 credits. Not in any system that plans on letting you leave with it. Men like the Barron didn't make bad trades. They made calculated ones. Kane was about to hand over every credit he'd managed to save over the last 3 years for a piece of machinery that would either make him untouchable or get him killed. Running a successful smuggling operation required stealth, wit, and a nose for danger. But above all, it required speed. Kane stood in the half-lit docking bay, staring at the exposed drive core like a man trying to decide whether he'd just bought freedom or signed his own death warrant. Perched high on a console in the flight deck with his tail wrapped neatly around his paws was Onyx, Kane's companion. A jet-black, genetically enhanced cat with sharpened cognition and the ability to telepathically link with Kane. His fur shimmered subtly under the dim lights. Black, but not quite black. More like a polished black opal catching light from angles that didn't exist. His eyes glowed faintly, a tinted fuchsia that made most people uncomfortable. Kane trusted him more than anyone. "You're going to say something," Kane muttered. Onyx's voice slipped into his mind, smooth and dry. "I'm deciding whether or not to tell you that this was a mistake. Now, or later, when it's more satisfying." Kane smirked, gently shaking his head. "I'll be back before you know it." He slowly made his way down the cargo ramp, exiting the ship where an emissary to the Barron was waiting. "This way," the unnaturally tall figure said. "He's expecting you." Kane lagged behind for a beat as he took in his surroundings. The site where the Barron primarily conducted his business was known as the Vault. Carved into a hollowed-out asteroid, a fortified black site hidden in deep space. From the outside, it was just another drifting mass of rock. Inside, it was a place where people like the Barron conducted the kind of business no one else was meant to see. It didn't officially exist on any published database, which made it perfect for the backdoor dealings that the Barron specialized in. He was led into a large, dark room that felt like a cathedral. The Barron was already waiting. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. Massive in stature, draped in layered fabric, his presence filled the room like pressure. His skin had that pale, artificial tone of someone who preferred the elusive cover of darkness. 2 silent enforcers who looked like they were carved from stone stood behind him, watching, waiting. Between them sat the new engine. Kane's eyes locked onto it immediately. Compact, powerful, beautiful. A symphony of engineering, and very much illegal. "Custom build," the Barron said, voice slow and heavy. "Gravitic slip modulation. Nothing in your quadrant moves faster." Kane leaned forward for a closer look. "Specs?" The Barron smiled a toothy smile. It wasn't friendly. "You don't need specs," he said. "You need results." Kane didn't like the way that sounded, but was in no position to argue. "Price?" asked Kane. 40,000, said the Barron. Kane's eyes narrowed slightly. Too cheap. Way too cheap, he thought. "Sounds a little too good to be true, if I'm honest." "Why so low?" asked Kane. The Barron leaned forward just enough to make the shadows shift. "Because I prefer long-term relationships," he replied with a devilish grin. There was a long pause. One of the enforcers shifted behind him. Subtle but very intentional. Kane understood the message clearly. No warranties. No refunds. He discreetly took a deep breath. "Install it. My assistant is transferring the credits." "I prefer the term accountant," said a feline voice in Kane's head. Back in the docking bay, Kane boarded the newly upgraded ship and made his way to the cockpit. Onyx gracefully leapt into the pilot seat, settling in like he owned the ship. "I take it that we're all done here now that all the drilling and hammering has finally stopped," Onyx said with a measured hint of sass. "Correct," Kane replied, playfully echoing his moody companion. Onyx dropped to the floor and paused for a quick grooming session as Kane settled into his seat. With a few gestures over the center console, he initiated the ignition sequence. The engine responded instantly with a mechanized purr. Kane pushed the throttle forward ever so slightly. In the blink of an eye, the ship took off like it was trying to pounce on a distant planet. Stars stretched and space bent as his grip tightened on the yoke, then gradually relaxed. He laughed a deep, euphoric laugh that he had been holding in for years. He thought about everything he'd put on the line to get here, to feel speed like this. This changes things, he said to himself. He pushed the propulsion system even harder. The ship responded like a predator, sharp, immediate, alive. "I hate to admit it," Onyx said, "but this may have been a competent decision." "No kidding. With this, we're untouchable," Kane replied with a grin. Several more minutes passed before he deemed it a sufficient test drive. Kane brought the ship smoothly to a controlled halt. "I don't think I'll ever get used to that. God, she's fast," he said, slightly out of breath. Riding the momentum of the moment, he opened the comms panel, patched into a bidding forum, and updated his profile. New specs, and more importantly, new pricing. An offer came sooner than it should have. Anonymous, encrypted, clean. Transport job, high-value cargo, payment, 100,000 credits, advance, 10,000 upon acceptance. Kane stared at it for a moment, briefly daydreaming about what he could do with that kind of money. Then, an unexpected transfer hit his account, 10,000 credits. He hadn't officially accepted the job, and there was no traceable origin. Kane leaned back hard in his chair, thought about the engine, thought about his future. Yeah, let's do it. He wasn't about to waste any more time. He'd worked years for access to premium clients. Now it was time to cash in. The pickup was standard. Remote planetoid. Minimal infrastructure. 2 men, 1 crate. Black casing, no markings. He glanced at Onyx, already forming the question, but Onyx beat him to it. "As long as we stop for food, I'm on board. Being the voice of reason requires a full stomach." After a celebratory meal and some much-needed sleep, Kane punched in the coordinates for the pickup. They arrived a short while later, but Kane overshot the landing zone. Not by much, but enough to look like a novice was behind the controls. "Still getting a feel for the brakes," Kane said with a quiet chuckle, smoothing over his clumsy handling. The new engine didn't ease into deceleration. It demanded precision, and he was still learning where the edge was. Onyx, draped across the back of the pilot's chair, didn't even open his eyes. "See if there's a button on that console marked training wheels," he said in a smug tone. Kane rolled his eyes and said nothing. The ship corrected hard, thrusters firing in short, controlled bursts before settling onto the surface of the small gray planetoid. Dust drifted outward in slow, weightless plumes. Kane unstrapped himself from the pilot's chair and depressurized the cargo bay. He stepped down from the ramp, boots crunching against the brittle surface. He scanned the horizon, slow and deliberate. Onyx patted down the ramp beside him, tail flicking once as he surveyed the emptiness. Nothing. The planetoid was lifeless. No structures, no signals, no visible infrastructure of any kind, just rock, endless, colorless rock. It had an atmosphere somehow, but it smelled strongly of ash and dust. Kane looked out toward the rock formation ahead, a cluster of jagged stone rising just high enough to break the flat horizon. Something about it felt intentional, too symmetrical. He narrowed his view slightly. "You see that?" Onyx followed his gaze and paused for a brief moment. "Yes," said Onyx. "I see the very obvious thing pretending not to be obvious." "Good," Kane huffed. Then suddenly the rock moved. A long seam appeared. Thin at first, then widening silently across the surface of the formation. Kane could feel the faint rumble of the movement through his boots. Hidden perfectly within the stone, a door was steadily being revealed. Kane and Onyx stood firm and watched the transition. The door opened fully to reveal complete darkness inside. After a brief pause, there was movement. Two silhouettes steadily made their way into light, humanoid with decidedly reptilian features. Their subtle mannerisms were almost too smooth, too controlled. One was large, broad with a densely muscled frame, built like something designed for force. The other was tall, slender, poised. Both wore tailored gray suits, exceedingly corporate. "Of course," said Kane, chuckling to himself. "It's important to maintain professionalism," Onyx scoffed. Between them floated a large crate, matte black and engineered to look impossible to open, suspended in a controlled gravity field, perfectly stable between the two figures as they advanced. They stopped a cautionary distance in front of them. A prolonged silence settled in before either side spoke. The larger one tilted its head slightly, evaluating. The slender one broke the silence. Its voice was smooth, measured. "You're early," it said. "New engine." Kane shrugged. Another long pause. The slender one smiled slightly. "Standard terms?" Kane asked, wanting this to be over as quickly as possible. The large one finally spoke. Its voice was alarmingly deep. "Transport. No inspection. No deviation." Kane nodded. The crate drifted forward in preparation for the transfer. Kane stepped closer, eyes scanning it thoroughly. Heavy, even without touching it. You could feel it in the way it held space around it. No markings. No identifiers. As the crate slowly made its way to the base of the cargo ramp, Kane glanced up. The larger one wasn't looking at him anymore. It was watching the ship. Calculating. The slender one cracked a smile. Just slightly, enough to feel out of place. Onyx's voice slipped quietly into his mind. "Something's off." Kane was inclined to agree, but said nothing. The crate locked into the cargo hold. With a solid final click, the deal was done. Kane stepped back. "Pleasure doing business," he said. The slender one's smile hadn't changed. Yes it is," it replied. The two reptiles turned and walked back into the dark opening as the massive door began to close behind them. A slab of stone sealing over metal, restoring the illusion, as if nothing had ever been there. Kane turned back toward his ship. Onyx paused for a moment, glancing once more at the sealed rock formation. "I don't like them," he said dryly. Kane climbed the ramp. "Yeah, me neither." The cargo bay doors locked with a solid metallic thud. Kane watched the status light shift from amber to solid green on the console. Secured. The mysterious black crate sat in the hold behind them, worth more than the ship it was sitting in. No transport manifest and no questions asked. Exactly the kind of job that Kane had been dreaming of. Exactly the kind of job that had to go perfectly. Kane leaned back slightly in the pilot's seat, eyes glazed over the console. For a moment, he attempted to dissect the uneasy rumble in his chest. There was something undeniably odd about the handoff. He exhaled slowly through his nose. Well, doesn't matter now, he thought to himself. The 10,000 had cleared. The route was charted. Kane's eyes flicking briefly to the drive output. And the engine. The engine changed the equation. Kane bit his lower lip, attempting to distract himself from the doubts that were creeping in. Probably just anxious about our first big job, he thought to himself. High risk, high reward, he exclaimed confidently. That's not what this is, Onyx replied. This feels like a rushed cash grab. This all came together way too fast. Not to mention Mr. Smiley back there at the handoff. Kane's fingers hovered over the controls. He didn't acknowledge his companion's honest assessment of their current situation. Instead, he powered up the thrusters. Cargo secure, he said. Flight path locked. The ship lifted cleanly from the surface before a smooth ascent into open space. The stars widened as Kane pushed forward. The new engine responded instantly with raw acceleration. He adjusted their vector and pushed a little harder. The ship surged onward. A smile crept across Kane's face. This is what I paid for, he said under his breath. You paid for something, Onyx said. We'll find out what. Just a killjoy at heart, aren't you? Said Kane dismissively. He brought up the route overlay. A thin blue line stretched across the display, cutting through a sector most pilots avoided. Pirate territory. Lightly trafficked, poorly monitored. Perfect for an ambush and perfect for someone fast enough not to care. Kane leaned back heavily into his captain's chair with confidence. So fast no one will even see us. They'll see us, Onyx replied. They'll just have a hard time catching us. Exactly, said Kane as he increased output even further. The ship responded like it had been waiting for permission. Stars streaked by the viewport like rain on glass. The hull hummed, not strained, but alive. For a brief moment, everything ran exactly as it should. They now had the caliber of ship that turned dangerous routes into profitable ones. The kind of edge that separated amateurs from elites. Kane exhaled slowly and let the last of his tension go. Then suddenly, without warning, the engine went dead. Forward thrust vanished instantly, dropping the ship into a silent drift. The stars ahead stopped stretching, collapsing back into fixed points of light. Kane's hands locked onto the controls, power levels collapsing as he scanned the system readouts. Drive output, 0. Navigation, offline. No heat spike, no structural damage. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a shutdown. In the worst possible place for this kind of problem. Out here, they were low-hanging fruit. Well, this feels deliberate, noted Onyx. Only one explanation made sense for random engine trouble after all tests and scans turned up nothing. There was something on this ship that wasn't supposed to be. Scan for foreign signals, Kane demanded. The system complied and results began flooding in. Nothing obvious at first, then suddenly the console erupted in flashes of bright red. Son of a... That bastard hit a kill switch somewhere on board, but I can't isolate it. Onyx stretched lazily. You sound stressed, he observed playfully. Will you go find the receiver? Kane growled. Unless death by pirate is on your bucket list. Onyx blinked slowly. Fine. He hopped down from the console and disappeared into the ship. Seconds later, another alert flashed. A proximity alert. 3 ships appeared on the holographic display. The lead ship appeared to be a pleasure cruiser, retrofitted with pulse cannons and armor plating. The 2 smaller ships were repurposed personnel transports with similar weaponry lazily bolted onto their sides. Each hull was marked with a red arrow, painted in a single violent stroke. Kane recognized the symbol immediately. Ships that wore it didn't chase cargo, they collected it. They were closing fast, 10 minutes out. He opened an incoming transmission from the lead ship. A gravely sinister voice poured into the flight deck and said, "This is the part when most rookie pilots start panicking." Kane said nothing. He had to hand it to the Barron. He really knew how to set the stage. "Let's keep this simple," the voice continued. "Power down your defenses and let my men come aboard. We'll take the crate and anything else you're carrying." Kane's gaze flicked to the console, calculating distance, timing, and angles. "Tempting," he replied, "but I'm no rookie." As he ended the connection, a metallic thud landed next to his boot. He looked down to see Onyx grooming his paw next to a small rectangular device that was shooting sparks intermittently. "Found your problem," he said. "You mean, our problem?" Kane replied with a relieved smile. "You're welcome," said the cat. "Also, we should tell the Barron that hiding a signal receiver behind a secondary coolant panel is not clever." He licked his paw again. "It's lazy." Then, without ceremony, he hopped into the captain's chair, curled up, and closed his eyes. Kane picked up the device and gave it a once-over. Tracking signal, remote trigger, lockout mechanism. "Yeah," Kane said quietly. "I can use this." He looked toward the cargo hold, back at the approaching ships, then down at the receiver. He smiled. 2 can play this game. Kane moved fast like his movements were rehearsed. He pulled a string of plasma grenades from a munitions chest hidden in the galley, wired them to the receiver, and secured the improvised charge to the crate before locking it in place. The pirates were 3 minutes out and closing. "Prepare the cargo bay for purge." The ship's operating system chimed, replying to the command. He then rebooted the engine and powered up the rest of the propulsion system. The console flickered brightly as the engine roared back to life. "There you are," he said with a satisfying grin. He spent the next 2 minutes focusing his breath and calming his mind. What needed to happen next had to go perfectly, down to the second. With another melodic chime from the ship's proximity alarm, the thieves had arrived. He opened the cargo bay and watched the crate drift out into space before nudging Onyx out of the captain's chair. Prioritizing their main objective, 2 of the pirates were already suited up and performing a spacewalk to secure the crate. 3 more were making their way to the cargo bay, hoping to board the ship before Kane could close the bay door on them. Another transmission came up on the display panel. "Don't worry, that cargo will be in good hands soon." The pirate captain chuckled, pleased with himself. "And so will that shiny new engine." Kane rested his hand on the accelerator and replied, "No, Captain, it won't." With one fluid motion of his hand, Kane's ship vanished into the distance, leaving the captain's men twirling end over end around the floating crate. 20 seconds out. 30 seconds out. Kane brought the ship back down to a halt. He estimated that the cruiser's pulse cannons would have a hard time hitting them from this distance. A hologram of the captain's scarred, hair-matted face was breaking through static across the display. "Who do you think you're dealing with?" he snarled. "This isn't over. You really think you can outrun us forever?" Kane glanced over at Onyx. The cat was already in position, the tip of his tail hovering just above a large red trigger near the weapons panel. "Yes," he said calmly. "We do." Onyx hammered down on the trigger. The hologram of the captain suddenly went dark as the 3 ships vanished instantaneously. A white flash tore through space, expanding violently. The shockwave was far more powerful than they'd expected, not just stronger, something else. The orb of fiery destruction just kept expanding with no signs of slowing down. Kane's triumphant smile quickly disappeared. That's not normal," he said under his breath. "How many explosives did you use exactly?" asked Onyx. "Not that many," Kane replied before leaping back into the captain's chair. The engine screamed as the blast chased them. Close. Too close. Then finally, it stopped, fading to blackness. Kane ran a scan. A wave of incoming data swirled overhead. He combed over the results, then exhaled slowly in disbelief. Neutron bombs. That was our cargo. 2, maybe 3, worth millions. Illegal didn't even begin to describe it. Treaty-breaking, system-level consequences. Now it all made sense. The price. The anonymous client. The dead engine. He was beginning to see that the Barron wasn't just smart, he was ruthless. "He was too clever to haul dreadnought-class weapons himself," said Kane. "We carried it past every scan, every checkpoint, and delivered it straight into pirate territory." Kane flopped back in his chair in awe. "He paid us our advance, and planned to pay the pirates with our new engine." Onyx sat up to summarize, which means he intended to buy a neutron payload worth millions, for a down payment of 10,000 credits. If I wasn't so mad, I'd be impressed. Kane gave a quiet, humorless laugh. He took a moment to digest everything that had happened. He checked his balance to see that the 10,000 credits were indeed still there. "Beats being dead," he said after a deep breath. 3 times our usual monthly take. Not the score we wanted, but far from a loss. He looked at the engine, still humming, still powerful, still his. "The fastest ship in the quadrant," he said. Onyx's voice drifted lazily through his mind. "With significantly more enemies." "That too," Kane smirked. "They set a new course for somewhere less exciting." away from the sector, away from the Barron, for now. What we need, said Kane, is time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to decide how we want to play this game going forward. Agreed, said his feline friend. But first, let's get something to eat. After a hot meal and a stiff drink, the ship was quiet again, smoothly cruising through space. Kane stepped out of the shower, steam trailing behind him as he dried off and pulled on a fresh set of clothes. The adrenaline had finally burned off. He made his way to his bunk and was staring up at the ceiling, trying to quiet his mind. A soft chime broke the silence. Kane's eyes shifted to the message board embedded in the wall. One new notification. No sender ID. Just a name. Scorpio. Kane frowned slightly and opened the message. Only 2 words. Nice work. He stared at it for a long moment. Onyx's voice slipped into his mind, low and unimpressed. Well, looks like we have a fan. End of transmission. More files are being decrypted. Subscribe to stay connected.